here. For those of you who aren't here, I'm sure you're seeing what's going on, that kind of shining brilliance behind me. It's really quite an impressive day today, no? It's a beautiful, beautiful day in New York. And as we start this Yizkor service in which we're going to connect with the memory of those who have passed, we can kind of take a look at the sky. I mean, we can't right here, but if you guys stepped out, there's this beautiful cloud right up there that's just kind of there and kind of disappearing, and it made me think of those who aren't with us anymore and the beauty that we live with, that they left us. Before we get to prayers, what I wanted to do was to invite anybody who would like to share a story about someone who you love, who has passed away. And that's what I would like the majority of the service to be. Just an opportunity for all of us to kind of say, you know, the name. We're going to definitely hear the names of all of the people in the congregation, who the close people to those in the congregation. And we'll say a prayer or two. We'll say the Kaddish. But I wanted to start with inviting people to, and I'm talking both about the people here in the tent and, of course, everybody on Zoom. So just because I figure it takes a minute to kind of conjure the right story, just to kick us off, just a few days ago was the yortzeit of my grandfather, Lou Lenman, and my family gathered on Zoom, and we shared some stories, and so I have them fresh in my mind. So I'll share one, and that is that he grew up very poor in Montreal. He was the seventh child, the first son after 6 daughters, and his parents were very poor. That they had a fruit cart, and they sold fruit. And when he was about 8 or 9 years old, he decided he's gonna start trying to make money, and so he bought a bunch of ice cream at the supermarket, and took it out and went up on the mountain, which is like Montreal's version of Central Park, and sold it. And that was the beginning. He was a very successful businessman, but it really started there, and when he was very, very young. And I love him dearly. And that's my story about Sabalu. And anybody here, Jonathan's going to give me a cue when somebody wants to speak on the Zoom. And if anybody here wants to come up and share a story, please do. We got one on Zoom? Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, am I seen by
You are.
Paul? Yes, with my.
We see you, yes.
I'm putting my hair away. Hi, Misha.
Hi.
I'm putting my baby to sleep, so we're a little disheveled right now. Um, I wanted to share about my father, Edwin Silverman, whose yahrzeit is this month. He passed away 3 years ago. And he was the son of refugees from a shtetl escaping pogroms. And my grandfather had come by himself at age 14. He walked from outside Kiev to Hamburg and was able to get passage on the White Star Line to Ellis Island. And he was helped by HIAS, by the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, to get passage to Chicago, where he became a tailor and eventually owned a dry cleaning plant. And many years later, after my father had gone through being an engineer and a doctor of romantic literature, he found himself working for the Walker administration. And they asked him to resettle the refugees coming out of the Vietnam War. And they thought it would be temporary, which I always find amusing. There was no provision at that time differentiating a refugee and an immigrant in our country. And so he became the state coordinator of refugee resettlement for Illinois for 40 years. He retired at 78. And he was later honored by the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society for resettling refugees after having come from them himself. And I just wanted to share with the congregation on this holiday. And thank you so much to all of this congregation and to Misha for including us over the past week. It's been really moving. My father's favorite quote was from a man he met in Kenya, where he was helping them coordinate refugee policy there. And it was a man who said, "Have you ever seen a border? Have you ever touched one in your hand? These borders are an invention that we have erected between us." And my father always referenced that. And I've been thinking a lot about it during this pandemic time, that if this time has shown us anything, it's that we're all one and that we can cross the boundaries that divide us. So just sending that prayer out for the new year. Thank you.
Amen.
That's beautiful.
Amen.
Yehi zichro baruch. Daniel? Here, you want to come speak here? I think it'll work like this. And don't put it right by your mouth.
Stay masked. What came to mind, I guess, for me in this moment was my grandfather. Leo Diamond was his name here in the States, and he was born in Austria, and he came here to Ellis Island when he was 5 years old. And I guess there's kind of three different things that all run through my head. The first two are just a couple of brief memories that he shared with me. One was, he said that he was one of 10 children. His mother, my great-grandmother I never met, had 17 children. 7 passed away, and 10 lived, but 7 passed away when they were babies. And he always told me that he was the only one on the boat in the family that didn't get sick. He was this happy, scrappy 5-year-old, running around. And then the other memory is of me when I was 3 and 4 years old. He had this huge belly, even though pictures of him when he was in his 20s, he was just built like an Adonis, And I was always sort of marveling at how I could stand on this huge belly, because it looked so big and soft. and mushy,
Not
but
nice.
somehow it was hard, and I would stand on it and he would, hold my hands. Um, and the other thing that was passing through me was I was I think 23, a little while ago now, when he passed away. And I was with him in the hospital when he was dying. And I have this really clear memory of sitting by his bedside, and he's reaching out with his hands, and his eyes were very, I guess, glassy. Glassy is how I remember it. And I remember thinking at that time, maybe it was the drugs that they had him on for the pain, or maybe it was that he was in the process of going, his body. And I leaned over to him and I said, "I love you, Grandpa." And I'll never forget, his entire face changed. And in that moment, he was able to hear what I said. I know that he heard it because his eyes got clear. And I'll never forget that moment. It really impacted me and almost, it's ineffable, really. There aren't any words for it, which is why I offer the story. And thank you for letting me share that.
Thank you, Daniel. Yehi zichro baruch. Tom, can we use any of these other mics here?
Of course, yeah. You want to use the second one?
I think it's better that I keep mine just for social distance stuff. We got a Zoom, yes.
Hi, this is Sasha Melamud. I would like to tell about my mother, Zoya Rom, and her sister, Svetlana Rozet. My mother was 12 years senior, and she used to tell how Svetlana was such a beautiful child when she was little. Svetlana had very difficult childhood evacuation in Kazakhstan from Kiev, and then they all live in Kharkov. Svetlana was very brilliant woman. She was a linguist, but she could not be a scientist because of the official anti-Semitism there in the Soviet Union. She worked as a technical translator. Yes, she translated from 18 languages, and she was also very compassionate. She had like several older people who she would visit and care for them and shop for them, just because she knew them from her various occasions in her life. So when we moved to United States, my mother took great care to help her also move and join us here. And when the tensions arose in our family, my mother moved together with her sister, and Svetlana was sick, and my mother cared for her until her passing in 2002. Yeah, and two of my daughters were inspired to become linguists because of their aunt Svetlana. So we keep very fond memories of her. And well, those who knew my mother in Yushu also know she was very brilliant and compassionate person.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you.
Sasha, I have such fond memories of your mother. The first time we met her, she was drumming with us, and she will always be part of this community as long as we are around. And thank you for talking about her, sharing about her.
Thank you.
Yehi zichra baruch. Jonathan, how many are there? A lot of people. I'm just trying to. There's two. Okay, and here are there a bunch more people? Okay, okay, great.
Hi, it's Greg Shatton, and I'm speaking about two people. First is my father, who was born in Włocławek, Poland in 1924, although all of his ancestors came from Kutno, which was about 20 miles away, very far away in those days. At the age of 2, with rising anti-Semitism in Poland, my grandparents left and came into Halifax, and ended up first in Toronto, but ultimately in Montreal, where my father went to medical school, and my grandmother, Muriel Erdberg Shatton, became part of a Yiddish literary circle, not nearly as famous as the most famous Kutno writer, Sholem Asch, but my father was an only child. His mother was very worried about him all the time, never let him ride a bicycle. But in any case, he lived a long life, but not long enough. So at the age of 2, here he was going from the old world to the new world. One of his first memories is actually a memory of loss. He dropped a little harmonica out the window of the train. And he remembers, or maybe this was told to him, he said, "Muziki, muziki," which is music in Polish. He's lost his music. But still at 2, he got a better life, and ultimately, created lives after him. And one is my nephew, Jacob Capicilli Shatton, who was born in 1997, so a long time after 1924. Jacob was given dealt the worst hand and made the best of it. He was diagnosed with a brain tumor when he was a year old. And after what seemed to be a successful operation, there was a relapse and it was inoperable. But Jacob was the happiest child for his entire life that you could ever meet, and the most musical. He had an inner musicality. He would give everyone a smile in the hospital. He would hold your finger while you sang to him. He was just a bundle of joy, and he was taken from this world to the next world at the age of 2. So far away. 2-year-olds with such a different arc of life. And then 2 years after that, my father left this world. And so I remember all of them. I remember, the intelligence and the joy of both of them. My father's, intellectualism, Jacob's joy, but of course the sadness that he'd be 23 and we have no idea, what that would have held, but it would have been wonderful. But when you think about moving from one world to the next world at the age of 2, I think you have to think about, obviously you'd prefer my father's journey, but Jacob made the most of his journey, his time on earth. And I hope that means that he, in the forever time after this, will have a life of joy and that we can remember and that we can honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Yehi zichram baruch. I just want to say to those here in the tent, if there are kids who are squirmy, Ronit in the back there is, she's got all kinds of games and tricks up her sleeve that you guys might want to check out. She'll take you to her spot in the back.
Hi, this is Amy, and I'd like to remember my uncle, Eli Goldfarb, whose yahrzeit was a few days ago. He was one of my father's younger brothers and one of his best friends. And my father and my uncle Eli and their 5 other brothers grew up very poor in Pittsburgh, in the Hill neighborhood, children of immigrants from Russia. And their lives were really saved, from what I understand, by the Irene Kaufman settlement house, where they were able to get a hot shower, earn a little bit of money, lifeguarding, and able to feel just a part of something that held them. One of the stories about my uncle that I really hold on to and that I reference often in my life has to do with his daughter, the first cousin that I'm closest to in my family. His daughter, Lori, suffered from very severe anorexia as a teenager and was near death. She was in the hospital for months. And my aunt, such a warm-hearted woman, would go and visit Lori, and Lori would never speak and would never look. And as a mother, I understand it was just too painful for my aunt, and she could rarely go. But my uncle, a sort of level-headed engineer with an incredible enthusiasm for life and an enthusiasm for teaching, but not the most emotionally emotive guy. I mean, far from it. He sort of just dutifully showed up every single day for months on end at my cousin's bedside and didn't speak, I don't think. Certainly didn't expect her to speak, but came. It was extremely painful for him as well, because my cousin never responded. She never looked. She never spoke. She never squeezed his hand when he held hers. And years later, though, she told me that the only reason she decided to live was that he came every day. And it's always been a very powerful reminder to me of the power of showing up and the fact that we don't always know if what we're doing is making any difference, but the simplest kind of showing up can save a life and save a world.
Wow, thank you.
Amen.
Amen. Yehi zichram baruch. Anyone else here want to share? Michael? I think this one's yours.
I'll tell you about my story about my father in his last hour or so. We were all gathered at the hospital in Florida, and the doctor comes and says, not much longer for my dad. And he had a sense of humor for all of his life, although it was sparing. So the doctor leaves, and we're all sitting there, and he has a coughing jag, a long, long cough. And then he looks up from the cough, and he says, "It's not the cough that carries you off. It's the coffin they carry you off in." And about an hour later, he finished his life. His heart was tired, and he finished his life. But I'm happy to tell you that story in the midst of all this.
Yehi zichro baruch. Anyone else? I guess I could say that one thing about Yom Kippur is that it's considered something of a rehearsal for death. We're preparing ourselves. That's one of the things we're doing. The reason we wear white is because when we die, our bodies will be wrapped in white and will be taken away in that coffin. That's a big piece of this holiday. It's accepting the reality of mortality and the fact that we will one day pass. And I think the Yizkor service, it's here to remind us. It's called Yizkor, which means remember. And Yizkor, it seems like we're talking about remembering those who have passed. But for me at this moment, it feels also like it's reminding us of the continued reality of those who have passed. They're still with us. They visit us, they speak to us, they do all kinds of things. And I think that's an important piece of this holiday. If we're meant to accept the reality of death, then we're also, I think, meant to take in the fact that our death is final in a certain way and possibly not in other ways. If there's no one else who wants to share, is there? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Eric. My dad died 3 years ago, and I wasn't that close to my dad. He was a distant guy. I became close with him later in my life. I'm actually not emotional thinking about my dad. For some reason, when I do public speaking, I tend to get emotional. But I became close to him with a lot of effort in my 20s and 30s. For some reason, the memory that I carry with him about him the most is we went on a cruise when I was in high school in the Caribbean, and there was blackjack on the cruise, and I went to play, and he stood behind me, and he told me what moves to make, and I made like $75 or something, and every move he told me to make was right, and yeah, I don't know why exactly that's the memory I thought of, but it definitely was. I was really impressed, and yeah, he never played cards or anything, so yeah, so thank you, thanks.
Thank you. We got one more Zoom.
Hi. Cindy thinks I can do this. I'm not sure I can. But I, I want to honor my father. In July, I called him. He was in a nursing home, and I couldn't go see him because of COVID. He was 96. He was 1 month away from his 97th birthday. When I was very young, he strongly encouraged me to play the violin, which was not something I truly loved. I kind of hated it. I think I smashed the violin by accident several times. And anyway, later in life, I went to the new shul, and Craig Udelman was playing the violin, and he played so beautifully. But I asked him, "Do you think a bad violinist could do better?" And he said yes. So I started taking lessons with him, and he's a wonderful teacher. And I took with him for 2 years, and then I started up again during this quarantine taking lessons with him. So I called my father, and I decided to play the violin for him. Coincidentally, I have never heard, is it called a nigun? A piece that has been played twice in this service, and Craig had taught me that, and I played it for my father. And he was very proud of his violin playing, and he responded by playing the second movement of the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto by heart at the age of 96. And he didn't play it that well. Don't get too excited. But I was so excited by it that I said to him, that is just amazing. I cannot believe you did that at age 96. So he played it again in a different key. And he told me, he was very cheerful, and he said, I've had some falls. And that night, we had a real connection that day. And that night, he fell again, and he hit his head, and he died 2 weeks later, 2 weeks before his 97th birthday. And I'm so grateful that we connected through the violin again. And that's the last good time he had, and probably one of his last memories. And thank you for letting me tell you about it.
Thank you very much. Yehi Zichro Baruch. We're going to read the names now of members of the congregation who have passed. Eduvihis is going to start us off. Then Suzanne will continue. Sasha will pick it up from Suzanne, and then Greg Shaitan is going to read the last names.
Marilyn Abrams, Sylvia Sullivan, Linda Bentley, Gertrude Berger, Leo Berger, Paul Berger, Charles Berkowitz, Mary Berkowitz, Milton Binswanger, John Brown, Roy Brown, Jacob Capusili Shaitan, Dario Chamiki, Alfred Cohen, Gil Cohen, Joe Cohen, Claire Cohen, Joseph Cohen, Marty Cohen, Mary Cohen, Manuel Cruz Horta, Esther Kudner, Robert Day, Julio Delgado Rojas, Aida Pitts, Eleanor Pitts, David Edelman, Joel Elkin, Ruth Elkin, Adele Ensler, Alfred Jacob Fate, Leah Feldberg, Solomon Feldberg, Irvin Freed, Ethel Gerberg, Leonor Gerowitz, Bella Gawanter, Benedict Gawanter, Harold Gawanter, Hugh Gawanter, Marsha Gawanter, Morton Gawanter, Margaret Gibbs, Stanford Gibbs, Theodore Gottlieb, David Gould,
Michael Abbott Gould, Paula Gould, Sarah Gould, Jack Grabell, Hannah Granick, William Granick, Abraham Greenberg, Anita Gross, Renata Gross Horowitz, Eric Gross, Barbie Hafner, Melvin Hecht, Charles Heller, Frank Heller, Grace Heller, Toby Heller, Carola Hirschman, Max Hirschman, Alan Hessel, Edna Hirschberg, Joseph Hirschberg, Gussie Jacobs, Helen Jacobs, Irving Jacobs, Joseph Jacobs, William Kahn, Diana Kamen, Anne Kanev, Charles Kanev, Lillian Kanev, Yursi Kapuchevsky, Lawrence Anna Kelly, James Thomas Kelly, Hannah Komanoff, Isidore Komanoff, Eva Kosser, Ruben Krempel, Sadie Krempel, Molly Kraskow, Morris Kraskow, June Lang, Alan Likend, Robert Levine, Ruth Levine, Solomon Levine, George Baller, Carmilla Baller, Julio Delgado Rojas.
Do we have Sasha to read the third chunk of names?
I'm waiting until the names come out. Carol D. Long, Miriam Lyons, Richard Edwin Lyons, Boris Malamud, Isaac Malamud, Polina Yakovlevna Malamud, Elaine Melser, Monte J. Melser, Abraham Merison, Esfir Mishulovich, Eleanor Mitchell, Robert Mitchell, David Maud, Anna Starkey Molloy, Fanny Newman, Harold Newman, Herman Newman, Leonard Newman, Rosalind Newman, Arthur Ferrell Roth, Jess Postmentier, Sophie Postmentier, Robert Posner, Louis Quinn, Inge Raigrodsky, Raphael Raigrodsky, Ira Rimmerman, Israel Robinovich, Lina Robinovich, Sarah Robinovich, Ella Rom, Zoya Rom, Velvet Rosenbaum, Max Rosenbaum, Melvin Ross, Clark Rowe, Dr. Amy Beth Rowan, Svetlana Rosette, Jack Sandler, Lina Sandler, Walter Shafir, Darren Schlanger, Abe Schlossberg, Minnie Schlossberg, Marilyn Schneider, Barbara Schonberger, Sally Schoela,
Juliet Siegel, Theo Siegel, Zeke Siegel, Chaim Shatton, Norma Shatton, Sherwood Schulman, Israel Siegel, Catherine Siegel, Albert Siegel, Danny Siegel, Gloria Siegel, Judy Siegel, Theo Siegel, Margie Siegel, Herbert W. Sloat, Mark Slotkin, Leonard Spector, Claire Taylor, Jack Taylor, Geraldine Teuteberg, James Teuteberg, Irving Tick, Sophia Ugaretz, Emily Ullman, Anne Humans, Maurice Humans, Gerhard Vasco, Don Vogel, Freda Vogel, Jay Vogel, Michael Vogel, Abram Washington, Alice Washington, Burton Wexler, Frederica Wexler, Lucy Weidman, Mayor Weinstein, Millicent Weinstein, Harris Weisblatt, Jean Weisblatt, Joyce Wendt, Marcia Westerman, Martin Weisenberg, Lania Winchester, Mark Winchester, Joel Zinn, Seth Zucker.
Thank you. Please rise for the memorial prayer, El Maleh Rachamim. El Maleh Rachamim שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת כל אלו יקרים ואהובים שהלכו לעולמם בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו על משכבם בשלום ונאמר אמן. Amen. Mourner's Kaddish. If you're in the blue books, we're on the bottom of page 390. And in the online Machzor, it's page 23. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביום איכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריך הוא לעילה לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן. Thank you. You may be seated. We're going to start the Mincha service in just a moment. If you guys need a little stretch or a walk around, go for it. Jonathan's going to get his guitar. We'll start in just a minute.